Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today, we are going to look at the interphase cycle. We are going to go through it step by step with easy to understand content as well as keynotes. Let's get to it. The very first part of the cell cycle is the G1 phase. No, I'm not talking about your driver's license. Anyways, the G1 phase is the phase that every cell goes through at the beginning of its life. The cell is very simple at the beginning of its life, so it needs to grow and mature. The cell grows by producing proteins for the organelles so that they can get bigger and more complex. During this phase, the cell also takes in nutrients to make the cell bigger and more complex as well. So here are the key points you should take away from the G1 phase. 1. The G1 phase is all about cell growth. 2. During this phase, the cell makes proteins for the organelles so that they can get bigger and more complex. 3. The cell takes in nutrients so that the cell itself can get bigger and more complex as well. Feel free to pause the video and take notes. Let's move on to the next part of interphase. The part after G1 phase is S phase. During S phase, a copy of the cell's DNA is produced so that the one cell can become two cells. The replication of the cell's DNA happens inside the nucleus. After this phase, the next phases move pretty quickly. Here are the key points you should take away from S phase. 1. S phase is all about the DNA of the cell being copied so that the one cell can become two cells. 2. The replication of the cell's DNA happens inside the nucleus. Feel free to pause and take notes. Now let's move on to the next stage of interphase. So the next part of interphase is G2 phase. During this phase, the cell creates other organelles needed for cell division. In animal cells, centrioles along with spindle fibers give the cell the frigidity it needs to be able to divide into two separate cells. Here are the key points you should take away from G2 phase. 1. This phase is all about creating the other organelles needed for cell division. 2. In animal cells, centrioles along with spindle fibers give the cell the frigidity it needs to be able to divide into two separate cells. Again, feel free to pause and take notes. Now let's move on to the final stage of interphase. The last stage of interphase is called M phase. This phase is when the cell actually divides. There are 5 stages to M phase, which I will get to in the next video. There are, however, 2 main parts of cell division. The first part is mitosis, which is when the internals of the cell divide, like the DNA and nucleus. The second part of M phase is cytokinesis, which is the physical dividing of the cell. Here are the key points you should take away from M phase. 1. M phase is a stage where the one cell becomes two cells. 2. The first main part of M phase, mitosis, consists of 4 stages, all of which focus on the division of the internal parts of the cell. 3. The second main part of M phase is cytokinesis, which is the physical, external dividing of the cell. Well, that's all for today's video. I hope you learned a ton and understood what was going on. Comment below if you have any questions.